Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell, and today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who broke up with her boyfriend because she was constantly managing his emotions, and now she feels guilty for abandoning him. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
Correct. We do not know what we are doing, nor have we been trained in any of this. These are just our opinions, so please take our opinions as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings, so we shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love.
All right, everyone, let's get into today's letter. So this letter comes from Emily, self-invalidated, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing from Australia. Dear Sam and Sierra, thank you for your amazing podcast. It has been so helpful to me. I've written and submitted letters in the past, so I hope it's okay to write another. I find it very therapeutic to write them, like I'm writing to a wise close friend. Here's my situation for context. I, 23 female, broke up with my ex-boyfriend, 23 male, about a month ago. It was incredibly hard for me to pull the trigger. He is amazing and truly cared about me so much. However, I decided to leave him because I felt like I was his fixer and therapist a lot of the time. I gave everything I had to him and became his one-person support system. In turn, I got all my self-reassurance that I was a good girlfriend and person, I was lovable, and that he wouldn't leave me, etc., because of what I did for him. That I was giving him what he always had deserved, unconditional love, support, and security. Even if it sometimes was to the detriment of myself, I was instead too busy thinking about his feelings, how I could fix his problems, or support him better. Unfortunately, due to having few positive role models in his life growing up, some of his behaviors would hurt me. I feel the need to mention some of these here, even just to remind myself that I was truly unhappy, to try and give a justification of why. He had trouble taking responsibility, apologizing, and acknowledging hurtful behavior. He often nitpicked things I would say and turn a general statement into a debate that someone would have to be right about, and just generally questioned minor things I'd do or say. He'd get very irritable when I made mistakes or I did something that did not go his way. For example, getting our train time wrong, etc. Making mistakes around him stressed me out. Anyway, often I felt like when we'd do something fun together, I'd have to manage his moods and smooth out any issues so that we could have a good time. Thus, any feelings or qualms I had, I tended to sweep away. Previous arguments demonstrated that it was never worth it. These and many more reasons are why I left. I don't think he's a bad person for these issues at all, though. We all have flaws and imperfections in relationships. A lot of it also seemed to be symptoms of his deeper trauma. He genuinely seemed to be trying his best, but a lot of these behaviors were just so entrenched in his past coping mechanisms. This makes it doubly hard for me to reassure myself that my hurt over these things and the relationship are valid. In the end, I felt as though I was hindering his own self-development with my cajoling. I wasn't sure he would be able to improve his bad situation, build a better support system, nurture his friendships if I was around. For myself, I didn't know if in the relationship I could step back to let him grow as an adult and an individual. I also felt as though I needed to work on myself by learning what makes me happy, being happy with myself. I was emotionally exhausted towards the end of our relationship. I was stressed and felt like I needed to justify any little thing that I did or said. Since I broke it off with him, I've felt awful. Guilt for abandoning him with no support system has eaten away at me, and I've just completely felt depressed. To cope, I've been constantly reading, listening, and absorbing all this relationship information to try and find some level of enlightenment or reassurance in my decision. That I didn't make a mistake. I didn't hurt him for nothing. Especially as a dumper, you can get a lot of negative reassurance instead of positive reassurance you try and seek for yourself, which feeds the seeking reassurance spiral. And when I sometimes find that miracle reassurance, I feel a little better for maybe an hour. Then it magically disappears from my brain and I rush back to my knowledge base, mainly the internet, to get that brain reassurance hit. Haha. I reach out to anyone or anything I can for reassurance for any decision, both big and small. The only way I've been able to get through the breakup thus far is by holding out till my therapy sessions in the hope of reassurance from them. I just can't seem to give myself the reassurance I need to feel better, in this case sad and heartbroken, but okay, with the decisions I make. In any part of my life, I can never trust myself or rely on myself. I can give others all the wisdom and advice that I gained trying to get enlightenment into my own situation, but I can never apply any of it to myself and use it to make myself feel better. I really wanted to write you a letter regarding self-reassurance. How does one improve at reassuring and validating their own decisions, emotions, and behaviors, especially when it comes to emotionally charged situations such as breakups? How do you stop desperately reaching out to others to ask, did I make the right decision over and over? Any musings or advice would be so appreciated. Thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, my darling, thank you so much for writing, for trusting us with this letter. It is one that I really deeply relate to as a chronic people pleaser, but also as somebody with an anxious attachment style who processes things exterior to interior, right? I don't sit in my body with my feelings. I don't have what other people describe as an intuition. I mean, I do. I've learned that I do, but it doesn't feel like I do because I immediately go to the external to validate or to understand the world. That is something I learned in childhood. And it sounds like it's something that you deal with as well, obviously. We are going to get into how to practice validating yourself, how to practice feeling self-assured in your decisions. And we're also going to affirm what's happening here in this breakup. I mean, honestly, it sounds exhausting to be in that relationship and emotionally unsafe. So it seems like you made the right decision. So you can always just replay this episode when you need reassurance. But first, we are going to take a very quick break.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I mean, long and short of it, Emily, you made the right decision about breaking up with your partner. You know, the way that the dynamic seemed to be playing out here was that you were constantly on guard, and that you know, the idea that you're afraid to make a mistake in front of your partner, for me, is like that's a no, you know, like that is a very legit reason to break up. You know, it sounds like you were pouring a lot into this and you were kind of doing a lot of self-effacing in this, right? Like that you were quashing your own needs, that you were doing whatever you needed to do to co-regulate with your partner to help bring him back to whatever emotional state that he needed to be in. And I'm sure that there's a lot of relationships that function in that way. And it's also a really hard place to be, right? It's difficult to be the one that is walking on eggshells and waiting for the next shoe to drop, and feeling like you can't take up space in the relationship because you don't know how it's going to trigger your partner, what sort of emotions are going to be evoked in that. And that's just like a really, really difficult place to be, you know, and it sounds like your partner had a lot of growing to do in terms of, you know, finding and understanding other places besides you where he can find support and understanding of why things are coming up for him in the way that they're coming up for him, right? Like, sounds like he could benefit from a therapist. Sounds like he could benefit from more friends that he could be more honest with. And, you know, I totally understand and agree with the idea that you can't be his one person support system, especially if the way that you're providing support is by completely like just becoming like a piece of glass that he gets to see whatever he wants into it, right? And you just have to sit behind it and be like, okay, are you feeling better? Right? Like, is everything okay? Right? Like, oh, I made that mistake. How do I fix this? Right? Like, that's not a productive place to be. And I also want to say, and I'm saying this to you as somebody who is also working on this in my life as well, given the ways in which I have been taught to be by my family of origin, is that there is a certain amount of it takes two to tango in this situation that I would just want to like name, right?
Yeah,
one of the things
out.
that I'm absolutely one of the things that I'm working on for myself is that I have a compulsive need because of the ways that I have been trained by specifically my dad to help people co-regulate, right? Like, that is the way that I feel like I am being of service to people. That is the way that I feel loved, right? Like, I'm going to tamp down on what's happening for me, and I'm going to figure out how to help you get back to a place where you're feeling good. And that's a superpower, to be clear, right? Like, my ability to work with people to help them get to a place where they're feeling better or have perspective on the situation that they're in, I think is one of like the best things about me. And it is a compulsive thing that I often have no control over. And it is like, it is so ingrained in my understanding of myself that when I don't do it, I feel like I'm overwhelmed with guilt, right? Like the fact that you like broke up with this person and are now feeling like guilty that you've abandoned them, it's so relatable to me. It's like, oh, I did a thing to like stand up for myself, and now all I feel is just like, I'm like, oh my God, I've hurt this person so badly. Like, what am I doing? I'm such a burden. Why did I, right? Like all of that stuff makes so much sense to me. I'm a burden for existing
and having needs and feelings.
100%. Yes. Well, when you are taught that is true, that's the only thing that you know about yourself.
I'm not, haha, that's funny. I'm haha, that's funny. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Why is that happening? And so I want, as you're thinking about sort of what future relationships look like, and maybe even navigating current relationships that you have with other people in your life, one of the things that I think would be helpful for you to work on, not just in terms of like finding this reassurance for yourself, but also questioning this need or this desire, whatever it is, to sort of help people feel safe and calm all the time, right? Help people feel good 100% of the time. And it's hard. I totally get that it's hard because I'm also dealing with it in lots of different ways in my life across lots of different relationships. And I just want to name it because I want to make sure that this dynamic that you've fallen into doesn't happen again in future relationships with people, right? Because for me, it's really easy to see that pattern play out over and over again. And I need different tools than the ones that I thought that I needed in order to be able to manage that. I thought that I had to be better about making people feel better. Like that's what I thought the solution was like, oh, if I just get better at helping people feel good all the time, then everything will be fine and I won't feel guilty ever. And actually what needs to happen is that I need to find ways to express my needs, to push back against people, or even to let people feel their feelings or be upset or whatever it is.
How dare you even suggest that is the solution?
Without feeling guilty, right? Like a lot of this is about my own self-soothing rather than me trying to become the perfect version of what my dad wanted me to be, which was the person who could quell every bad emotion that happened in our family. Anyway, that's a glimpse into my personal life.
Oh, I think this is such a great opportunity because, that is our self-soothing tool. When things get anxious, we were not taught to caretake for ourselves. So when shit hits the fan, what is the tool that we were taught? Go external. Go take care of somebody else. Get somebody else's opinion. And this applies to the letter writer. I think that this pattern, I'm so glad that Sam pointed out this pattern in you because I think it's happening here too. There are tangible pieces of advice I can give you about resting in your own self-assurance, learning how to listen to your intuition, yada, yada, yada. And it will all come back to this external, internal pattern that we were taught, right? That take the temperature outside before we take the temperature inside, right?
Ooh, yeah, that's real.
And so right now, this cycle of reassurance that you are sort of feeling addicted to in this post-breakup era, it is doing the same thing. It's saying, can somebody else tell me how to feel? Can somebody else tell me what's wrong so that I can calibrate myself to other people? Do you know what I mean?
Tell me the right thing to feel, right? Like,
yes.
You tell me what's the exact right thing to be feeling in this situation. Like, that's so relatable.
And I think people like us, we actually love when somebody else is in crisis because then we don't actually have to know how we feel. We just show up for them. Do you know what I mean?
That's so real, yes.
And so that's what's happening here. Or at least I see myself in this cycle in terms of like, you finally decided to stand up for yourself and to say, this relationship isn't good for me. And now you don't have the thermometer that was your relationship to tell you how to feel. And we just, in general, we are taught to like feel bad about hurting other people, which is generally culturally a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But gets conflated and abused like all other things, like you can't move through life without hurting people's feelings. That's impossible.
It's impossible.
And I think that it's important to recognize that I'll give you a couple small pieces of advice about how to start listening to your own intuition, how to self-assure instead of getting it externally. But it's always going to come back to how we were taught at some point in our early existence that outside of us will tell us how the inside should feel or act, that our intuition, our feelings aren't enough to act. It's not enough that you didn't feel like you could make a mistake around your boyfriend. It wasn't enough that you were unhappy. It's that you have to have other people tell you that it is enough. And like Sam said at the beginning, it is paramount to me that you find a relationship with whom you can make mistakes, because that is a guarantee in life. That it's guaranteed. It's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes, and they're going to make mistakes too. Some small pieces of tangible advice I can give you that I was reminded of recently, when I think about times of great transition in my life where I was trying to break a pattern, that's what you're doing here. There's a Pavlovian bell pattern here where you feel discomfort. You're not sure how to affirm yourself because you were never taught or you never learned how to build that skill. And the bell rings and you go externally and you say, how should I feel? What is my purpose here? What do I do here? And that's okay. I want to say that's okay. It's okay. We all need other people. But when I was in times of great transition where I was trying to break patterns or not reach out to exes or whatever, sitting in that discomfort, setting a timer for 3 minutes, start with 1 minute, sit with the discomfort for 1 minute. Sit with the discomfort for 3 minutes. Sit with the unknown for 10 minutes, knowing somebody else isn't telling me how to feel right now. My job right now isn't to know right or wrong. My job is just feel it, right? It's just to feel it, just to listen to myself, right? Setting little timers, giving yourself forced alone time. I think it's a great thing that you're waiting for that therapist appointment, but you're right. At some point you have to learn how to comfort yourself. Think about, this sounds so silly, but imagine look in the mirror, or imagine that you're talking to somebody else and say, what would you say to yourself? Hey, that relationship was really hard. It's okay that you broke up with them. It's okay that you didn't make them feel good. That relationship was really hard on you. You have every right to leave. I mean, it's literally saying the script to yourself, and it feels uncomfortable. It for sure does. I love that Sam writes things down and carries them around in their wallet for a decade, right? Pieces of advice. So you hear something on today's podcast, or you hear something from your therapist, write it down, hold it. There's something tangible for you to touch and pull out the next time you need reassurance. Boom, you've reassured yourself. Boom, that is one small step towards that direction,
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that one of the things that can be helpful when you're feeling this need to go external, to get out of your body into the internet, right? Is also just even taking the time to describe the sensations that are happening in your body without judgment, right? Without saying oh my God, I'm feeling tightness in my solar plexus and that means the world's ending, right? Or that means that I'm so anxious or whatever, but just being okay, what are the sensations that are happening, right? I'm feeling a lot of tension in my neck, right? Or, my heart is beating really fast. And just noticing then those sensations without saying that there's a need to fix them. But part of this, I think, is a little bit about an exposure therapy to say yes, my heart is racing, but I'm also safe, right? Yes, my solar plexus is as tight as a knot, and also I'm okay, right? Nothing bad is happening to me or in my body, right? Part of it is noticing some of those sensations and disconnecting them from where we may have made connections in the past, right? Where it's my solar plexus is tight, therefore I'm doing something wrong and I need to fix it. I need to go handle it somewhere. Or my heart is racing. Oh my God, that means that somebody's really mad at me and I need to make them not mad at me anymore, right? We've learned so many ways to connect the physical sensations or even the emotions that we're having with particular things that have had in our life, understandably, right? Because of course we are. Of course, our brains are so good at making those types of connections. So part of it is interrupting that before the thing happens to say, no, actually, all I'm feeling is tightness in my shoulders. That's just a sensation, right? That's it. That's all that's happening here. Okay, cool. So what do I need to do? Do I need to relax my shoulders? Do I need to take a deep breath? Do I need to rub them out? Like what needs to happen in this? And that kind of disruption can be really helpful because our brains are so wired to have these patterns where this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And suddenly we're 10 feet down a road that we actually don't need to be walking down, right? Because that's not the actual path that this is telling us is true.
I also want to add something that like maybe this is what you write on your piece of paper. The world will not end if someone doesn't like a choice you've made. And I think that's what's happening here too, is the idea that like you feel so bad about leaving your boyfriend, but you also need to know from the external, from your friends, from your family, from your community, from your therapist that you made the right choice. And guess what? Some of them don't know. Some of them will never understand. Your ex might always be mad at you, right? And I think that's something that I had to learn too, that like it is okay if people don't know the intricacies of why you made this decision. They don't need to know. They don't deserve to know. You are allowed to make those decisions on your own without other people co-signing them. And if they don't know, if they don't understand, the world isn't going to end. Your body is safe. Your soul is safe. A huge thing for me was recognizing that a lot of the internal work I was doing was because I was terrified, petrified in my core, in my DNA, that people weren't going to understand me, were going to disagree with me, and were not going to like me. You know, like, oh my God, oh, well, I broke up with this person and they didn't know why. And it looks like I'm a huge bitch because they're suffering and what. Like, so now I have to explain it. Now I have to make them understand. Now I have to get their opinion and their permission to be able to exist, you know, and that is not only unsustainable, it's impossible. People will never fully know or understand our lives. We will always disappoint people. We will always not live in accordance to how people think we should live, like, because they're not us, right? Yep. And I just want to say that is okay. That self-assurance starts when you begin to divorce yourself from the external. And on top of all of this, now that I am remembering what we're talking about, I just also want to say, in this moment, we need other people. It's okay to need other people. It's true. Okay to ask for assurance. I forgot we wanted to say that, and we like hammered home, like, you don't need anybody. They'll never understand. But like this breakup happened recently, and I don't want you to deny yourself the human support and community that we all deserve and need through hard times. It's not a sign of weakness to me that you want other people to mirror back your experience to you, because you know what? That is when I start to believe it. That's when when did I cut off my abuser? Not when they abused me, but when I found out they abused somebody else, right?
That's right.
It makes sense to me that you would need people to reflect this back to you. That's okay. This is something to lean on, especially in this early period of transition. And also, the longer goal is to rest, to find peace and self-assurance in the fact that you are capable of discerning your own future, of figuring out what your next step is, and that is enough. You are enough to make these decisions.
Absolutely. All right, my love, if it's not clear, we absolutely love you, and we deeply relate and empathize with what you are currently going through. Yeah, absolutely. We hope that there's something in this that both reassures you and offers you an opportunity to try something new, to move into a different way of supporting and loving yourself. And we thank you for writing this letter, and we hope that this helps.
Yes, we love you so much.
All right, everyone, it is Friday, and on Fridays, we like to set you up with a blind date. This is when we try and send you home with something that we think you're really going to like. This week, our blind date is...
Okay, it's a book series, but there's a little bit of a backstory, so stick with me.
Okay.
So some of our friends have got me into spicy novels, right? And some of them are awful. That shall not be named. If you want to know which one Sam and I hate, subscribe on Patreon. But I read one recently that I really liked enough. I get really torn because I'm a sucker. I love like romantic, sexy stories, but I'm also like, I really want a good storyline. I really want good characters. I want them to be believable. So a lot of the spicy books out there are just not doing it for me because they're not putting in the work for me to care about the characters, you know. And it's, listen, I can just make up a sexy story in my head. like, I don't need the book. But anyway, this is all to say, I recently read a spicy story and I was like, oh, this is pretty good. It's called like Fate Inked in Blood, I think, by Danielle L. Jensen. And that led me, I was like, okay, this is good, cool. It's very popular right now. But it actually, that's not my blind date. My blind date is
that's what
a
I thought
book
it was gonna
series.
Be.
Nope, I'm telling you. It was a book series written by Danielle L. Jensen before the spicy novel came out. And it's a series, it's called Dark Shores. I'm currently on the second book. And I'm really loving it. Like, is it the most insanely beautiful book written ever? No. It's like a Game of Thrones Mistborn light. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. Yeah.
But I'm really enjoying it. You can tell that she's really well read. There are lots of nods towards books like Game of Thrones or and Sanderson books, you know, which I love in fantasy. So it's just like cool and fun to be in a new immersive world that way. And it's not spicy. There are some like, there's romantic relationships that lead the story, but it's not like the spicy novels that we're seeing blowing up right now, which tells me a fact that I love, which is that she wrote fantasy before writing a spicy fantasy book and was like, oh, no, I want to get that bag. And then wrote the spicy book and it blew up. You know what I mean? Which I actually fucking love because I like when artists make smart strategic choices to secure their financial future. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Anyway, this is a really long-winded way to say, like, I think I'm pretty into this series right now and would love to chat about it with anyone else who is as well. It's called Dark Shores. It's obviously been out for like 38 years, like most things that I find. Not really, 2019. But anyway,
Still 5
it's
years.
old news in the fantasy world. I really like it. It's I've been enjoying it. The audiobooks are good too, so check it out and let me know if I'm gonna like hate it, like if the tide will turn.
Yeah, if it's like the third book actually sucks. Yeah,
like the series that will not be named.
Let's not name it. Stop it.
Okay.
All right. I love it. All right, everyone.
Yeah. Check it out.
Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like to find out which book series we absolutely hate, you can always support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon, you will get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to our monthly office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, the ability to assure yourself begins with giving yourself permission to disappoint others. That's it. That's the core. That's the wound right there. Give yourself permission to be unlikable or disagreeable or to do something that someone thinks you shouldn't. It's not about being an asshole. It's about recognizing that we do not match our worldviews with everyone else in life. That's impossible. So affirm yourself that you are able to make the right decisions for your life because you are uniquely positioned to do so, unlike anyone else. And if all else fails,
just break up.